Thank you all for your patience. We'll go ahead and call this meeting to order at 7:42. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. Roll call.
Vice Chair Gopal. Here. Chair Tombe.
Present.
Commissioner Stanek.
Here.
And Commissioner Davis and Commissioner Shu are both absent today.
Excellent. Looking for a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes of September 5th.
We don't have a quorum for that because I wasn't here.
All right, we will move this to the next meeting. Seeing as that will be a postponement. All right, we will move to the oral communications section of, excellent, these are all oral communications. Oral communications, for those that are in the audience, if you would like to say something to the commission on an agenda item, that will be saved for the agenda item itself. If you would like to speak to something that is not on the agenda item, this is the time. If you look up to the front on the right-hand side, there are blue cards. These blue cards are where you can fill out your name and information, and you will have 3 minutes to speak to the commission. It appears that we have 3 oral communications. If I can have Timothy Liu come on up, that would be great. There's going to be 3 minutes to speak. There's going to be 3 minutes for you to speak. You'll hear a little beep when you have 15 seconds left. Why don't you go ahead and state your name?
Hold on.
Okay.
Do you have to speak 3 minutes?
No, you do not have to speak 3 minutes. You can speak for as up to that amount of time or less.
Okay. So, hello, I am Steven, and I'm from Abraham Elementary School. So, hello everyone. We are the Space Bots team in LEGO FLL competition, which stands for First LEGO League. I am Steven with my teammates. We are doing a project about playground for disabled kids to help society and make more freedom for people with disabilities.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Stephen.
So,
Okay, you can have a seat. And who's coming up
now
next?
it's Timothy's turn.
All right, Timothy, right? Excellent. Go ahead and say your name so we have it for the record.
I am Timothy. Put yourself into the place of a physically disabled person. What would it feel like to miss out all the fun that able-bodied kids are having? According to the statistics, 6% of children below 15 years old are disabled. We visited many parks in Cupertino, including Jollyman and Memorial Park, and none are currently accessible by disabled kids. The parks are not accessible because of a few reasons. The first reason is the stairs. Stairs are not suitable for the kids who sit in wheelchairs because they can't go up it. It would be an awful lot of work for their parents to carry them up all the way. Another reason would be the monkey bars. As you see in most parks, monkey bars are not suitable for kids in wheelchairs because they can't pull themselves without the wheelchair falling. Secondly, they may not have the arm strength to do it. The third reason is that the flooring are wooden chips. Wheelchairs can't run smoothly or will get stuck in wooden chips, making it a road barrier for most disabled kids.
Thank you very much. Next, if you want to go ahead and say your name for the record.
My name is Jiajing Liang, and I am a 4th grader at Abraham Lincoln School. During our playground research, we have found out 6% of people worldwide have one type of disability. In fact, we have an entire class of disabled kids at Lincoln. After I started this project, I sat back and realized that I've never seen the disabled kids on the playground. So I wondered, what do they play? I got the answer to the question after some research. Disabled-friendly playgrounds are called inclusive playgrounds. Our team has already visited an inclusive playground in Palo Alto. It was really fun and very, very crowded. After, we learned that 25,000 people visit the playground every single month. A similar project has been held by the same company all over Santa Clara District. And every single city has a disabled playground project going, except one city. And that city, very sadly, is Cupertino. And thank you for listening, and we believe that everyone deserves a place to play. And do you support building an inclusive playground for disabled kids?
Great, thank you very much. All right, is there anybody else who would like to speak? Wonderful, thank you so much. First, I wanted to say thank you for taking the time to come and speak to the commission. Listening to the voices of the people in our community, especially the young voices in our community, is very important. So thank you very, very much for coming and speaking with us. I think that the issue that you have brought up, the project that you're talking about, an inclusive playground, is a very important thing, and that is something that the commission is very interested in. And I know that we've been working on this for a while, and so actually I'm going to ask Jeff to just provide a brief update on the inclusive playground for Cupertino.
Hi, kids and community members, Chair. I'm Jeff Melkus. I'm the Director of Parks and Recreation. Thank you so much for coming today and talking to us about this important subject. I'm happy to tell you that recently we wrote a proposal to Santa Clara County, who gave us $1.4 million to help build an inclusive playground. Our City Council has pledged $1.2 million. So we have a total of $2.6 million in order to build a community garden. Where we're at right now.
Inclusive playground.
What did I say?
Community garden.
I am so sorry. I've got community gardens on my mind. We've got, that's the next presentation coming.
Excellent.
Okay. If I may, the inclusive playground will be at Jollyman Park, and we expect it to be built within the next 2 years. So we will have that very special playground, and it will be something exactly as you talked about. We will not be using chips, so wheelchairs can get from one place to the next. And every single item on there, every single play item, everybody at different levels of ability will be able to use either that item or something that's right next to it. So we're looking at different whirly things and different kinds of swings and zip line ideas and quiet places for people that need to have a safe place to kind of get away a little bit at the playground. It'll be considerably bigger than any of the other playgrounds that we have in the city. So that's an update.
Thank you very much. So we are excited, and thank you so much again for coming and talking to us. This project is very important, and as we start to design what the park actually looks like, we would love to have feedback. And I know we have your contact information, so we'll be able to stay in touch with you as we begin to design the playground as well. So thank you so much, and that playground that you all were talking about will be coming within the next 2 years. Thank you very much. Wonderful. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the remainder of the agenda. We have old business, item number 2, subject McClellan Ranch, community garden improvements and update.
Good evening, Chairwoman Tumbe, commissioners and members of the community. My name is Michael Zimmerman. I'm the CIP manager for the city of Cupertino. Tonight I will give you an update on the McClellan Ranch Preserve community garden. And I will discuss direction received from the council in June, present the latest conceptual plan, discuss the design, review the project schedule and cost estimate, and describe how the project was sequenced to utilize volunteer forces. I'll then turn the discussion over to Director Milks, who will discuss the use of volunteers in more detail and briefly describe the potential for additional community gardens throughout the community. So back in June, during our annual budget process, the City Council provided some direction. They approved a budget of $1.2 million for the community garden. They directed us to pursue volunteer opportunities to help reduce the cost, and they provided an additional $300,000 budget to explore community garden opportunities throughout the city. So subsequent to that direction, we've been meeting with the gardeners, and we received some input on the revised design. I'm not going to read all of them, but this sort of gives you an idea of the input that we received. They preferred raised beds. They wanted it a uniform size. We still wanted to put in some pest netting or some deterrents for pests that dig through the ground. Again, we put in a tall fence around the perimeter to, again, try to make it pest-proof. They wanted some amenities, including sheds, a bike rack, some picnic tables. And we did want to make the community garden ADA accessible, so there'll be DG paths for part of it, and in other parts of the garden, there'll be wood chips. And again, then we'll have some composting opportunity and some areas for some green waste. And one of the items they said was would help reduce costs if the city provided the soil and the wood chips, so we've looked into that as well. So this is the conceptual drawing that we came up with. As you can see, it provides, by the count, there's 115 plots, 6 in-ground plots, 8 ADA plots, and 7 plots for the master gardeners. The raised beds, they're all raised beds with those exceptions. Sizes that are 6 by 16. Again, uniform shape. 80 raised beds will be 4 feet by 16 feet. And again, we're going to put in hardware cloth, which is a wire mesh underneath the entire site to try to deterrent-proof or rodent-proof the entire site. And we'll also put in additional hardware cloth underneath each bed, so in case a rodent does get into the gardens, they still won't be able to get into the individual beds. As you can see, this is we have an area identified as phase 2. So this plan also gives you the opportunity to increase the number of plots should funding become available. So this is an idea of what we're looking at, of trying to construct. Basically raised beds made of redwood, bolted together, about 12 to 18 inches tall. Wood chips in the walkways with enough area in between to get a wheelbarrow through, and 2 people can garden side by side without an issue. This is our preliminary schedule. We're tracking on the design portion of it. So we'll complete, based on any input we receive tonight, we'll complete our preliminary design tonight or by Friday, and then we'll start going into construction documents. We think that'll take about a month to put those together, finalize the design, make any last-minute tweaks, and then we'll advertise in the month of November. Depending on how the bids come in, if we have the money available, we will then go for a council award at the middle of December. Again, we have a contract execution phase, get the contractor lined up, and so we'll start in January, hopefully before the bird nesting season that starts in February. That's our target. If we go longer than this and we end up into the bird nesting season, we'll have to do some surveys, some bird and owl surveys, to make sure we're not impacting any wildlife in the area, which could potentially delay us until September. So the goal is to stay on this schedule, and we're tracking closely on this at the moment. As you can see, the schedule lines out about 2 months for the contractor to perform their work. The contractor is responsible for basically all the earthwork, putting down the construction netting or the hardware cloth, building the perimeter fence, adding the irrigation, and building the paths. Once they're completed with their work, we'll have opportunities for volunteers to come in and help build the raised beds, spread the bark, and help with putting in the soil in the boxes. So we're targeting a May grand opening. That is subject to change. We're building this in possibly the worst time of the year. We're starting in the winter when it's the rainy season. Right now, this area is just basically dirt. So, if it rains, and depending on the severity of the rains and the intervals of the rains, we could be delayed substantially. So, we'll address that as it happens, and hopefully we'll have a dry winter and we can get through this and meet this schedule. This is our current cost summary. I explained that the council approved a budget of 1.2. This is how that money breaks down. Currently, we're tracking about $75,000 over the approved budget. We are looking at ways to reduce that cost. One of the ways is to reduce the overall size of the garden, which we prefer not to do. We're trying to maximize the amount of opportunities that we're creating. And we know the waiting list is long, and people have a lot of interest. So we'd like to build as many plots as we can, provide as many opportunities as we can. But we'll be looking at ways to reduce that cost, or worst case, we'll go back to council and ask for additional funding. The next 3 slides basically show how we've sequenced the work and how we've broken it up in order to provide some opportunities for volunteers to help reduce the cost. We also included a line for city staff. So what we're envisioning is, instead of buying pre-made boxes, we'll have city staff purchase the lumber and basically cut the wood and drill the holes and get it ready for assembly. And then the volunteers can take those kits and assemble the boxes in the locations that are shown on the plan. So, like I said, here's an outline of what the contractor is going to perform. Again, the city will procure the lumber and all the hardware, all the topsoil, all the wood chips. So we'll furnish all that. We'll fabricate the planter kits, and then we'll ask for volunteers to come in on a series of weekends to help us build the raised beds, fill them with soil, and then finish off the pathways. And
Okay, in terms of the volunteer opportunities, the volunteers that we're hoping to work with will come from primarily 3 areas within the community. The gardeners themselves will be asking to help participate with the effort. We've been approached by some members of our Master Gardeners group that have a large contingent of folks that they're going to help organize and ask to come and help. And we've also been approached by some other groups, particularly just this evening, in fact, a Boy Scout group. And so we're going to be soliciting assistance and help to try to kind of populate the number of volunteers that will assist during the work parties that will happen in the spring. We'll make the work parties fun, enjoyable, exciting, interesting, adventurous, as the folks will help us to put together picnic tables. We'll help to put the raised beds together, which will mean cementing the post into the grounds where the contractor has already marked them, pouring the ready mix cement into the hole and getting those posts set. Actually taking the redwood planks, attaching them, bolting them together. We'll be out there, city staff, with small equipment that will deliver augmented soil right into the beds once they're built. But then each of the gardeners have the opportunity to spread it and get it ready to go for their garden. We'll be looking at chipping the area in between. As you saw in the plan, there's a little harder surface around the ADA areas and the entranceways, and outside of that, the pathways will be chipped, and we'll need to be spreading those and ensuring over time that those are kept up and not full of weeds and such. So that's pretty much it for the volunteer effort. We are appreciative in advance of everyone who may step up to help, because it's that effort that will allow us to bring the project in on board to, and within our budget. So.
Excellent. Any last comments? Did you want to round it out?
Absolutely. There is one other item here that we had talked about. When council had approved the 1.2 million, they asked us to look at other satellite gardens out in the community and to spend about $300,000 set up on various gardens. We are still investigating different ways to do this, and a couple of different options would be for us to work with different communities, different neighborhoods, and perhaps put one at Wilson Park or Portal Park or Creekside Park, a small satellite garden that may allow for 15 or 20 plots, say. Another option we'd have is to separate the money out in, say, $20,000 or $25,000 grants, allow folks from other nonprofits in the area, whether they be schools, whether they be churches, whether they be neighborhood groups that simply want to form like a friends of a particular neighborhood group. And then there's a process we would go through to actually probably bring the application review to this, to this commission, and then decide to provide the, grant money for others to build. Those are just two of the many options that are out there so far. We'll be attempting to get the other gardens built first, and then diving into how we're going to distribute that other $300,000 at a later time.
Excellent, thank you. All right, I know we have some clarification questions from the commissioners. Go ahead.
Yeah, so thank you. All the questions are related to the cost. Let me start with one by one. So you talked about $300K to be spent, and which is not included in the projected cost summary of the 1.2. Where is it coming from? So there was a $300K to be allocated, as Director Jeff mentioned about it.
Yes.
But I don't see any of them mentioned in the project cost summary.
So
for the
this is
1.2.
specific to the McClellan Ranch Preserve Community Garden, and the $300,000 is independent and separate from that. So we have a total of 1.5. 1.2 is allocated for McClellan Ranch Preserve, and 300,000 is for other community gardens throughout the city.
I see, okay. Maybe when I come to the discussion, I'll have more on it.
Cool.
The second one, question is, what is that $100K for the construction management? What does that mean, construction management?
So the city usually contracts with an outside agency to do testing, inspection, and management of their projects. So this is to hire a third party to come in, make sure that the facility is built per the plans and specifications that we've outlined through the bid process.
Okay, so that's not involved in the first line item, which says estimate of portable construction.
Right. Estimate of probable construction cost is basically the hard cost of delivering the product. It's just it's the chips, it's the wood, it's the grading of the site, it's the fencing, irrigation, all the hardscape items. Construction management is usually considered a soft cost. So it's,
Okay.
it's
One last question. So it says the preliminary design is complete, or will be complete as of tomorrow, right? October 4th. Is that done by staff, or is that by the contractor?
done by staff.
Done by staff.
So we're going to take whatever input we received tonight, anything else that staff has commented on, and make some final tweaks, and then we'll start rolling into construction documents. But we wanted to make sure the concept was solid, people agreed with what they were getting, and if they had any preferences for changes, they could state those.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome, go ahead.
So my questions focus a lot on the process of getting here and the gardeners that we've had. So we had a design, and we had a lot of discussion with the gardeners, and then that was set aside. Now we basically have a new design. Has this design been discussed before tonight with all of the gardeners there?
We had one well-attended community meeting or get-together, the Environmental Education Center, where we talked about the different specifications that would go into this. For the most part, those specifications that were spoken about, some of them were one way, coming from staff to the group. Some of them came from the group back to staff. We took those together, created a laundry list of different options and different things that we wanted to see, sent it to the contractor, and that's what produced this particular document. There are some elements in there that we're hoping that we can figure the budget out. For instance, I think this plan calls for water, not at every plot, but every fourth plot, if I remember reading it right. Our hope is to still find the money to get each of the plots their own. That doesn't mean that there isn't water available. It just means that it might be across the path, and there's some other ways operationally we deal with it. So there's still some other things that we're trying to work through and work through the draft. But yeah, when we originally met with the gardeners, we created a really nice design. There was quite a bit of work that went through it. Unfortunately, the budget just simply wouldn't support it. When council decided that we would, when their decision to ask to move certain garden plots out away into satellite areas, there no longer was money to afford that particular design.
So how does the number of plots compare now to what we had before?
This is considerably more plots.
More plots, but they're smaller.
Well,
Are they?
yeah, these plots at 16 feet by 6 feet, say for the majority of them, that's a significant amount of gardening space. That's very similar to what is at the Lawson Garden in Mountain View that we looked at as somewhat of a guide. It's a new garden and it really looks nice. The original list, I think, was, I want to say between 75 and 80 plots with the other design. And pre the new designs, we were running at about 50 or so plots at the garden before we deconstructed it.
And this is 115, did you say?
This is 115 plots.
Okay. And how many active gardeners did we have before we closed it down? How many did we have under contract?
Well, as a result of the drought, we actually didn't have that many. I want to say it was in the 40s at some point.
40s? Okay.
Yeah, 42 or so. Although there is a large waiting list. The waiting list was over 100 at the time.
Okay.
During the drought, we simply stopped issuing new gardens.
So you talked about with the volunteers that the gardeners could have the opportunity to come in and work on their own. I didn't see anything in here for the process of the applications for the gardens for the new plots and what the timing is for that, so that we know who they are, how are they going to be allocated and such with the previous gardeners and the waiting list.
During the initial kind of public involvement process for the gardens in the first design, a lot of work went into redesigning the garden rules when they're inspected, what that process is. And so we've got that, and we can come back to you on a separate presentation. It's pretty extensive.
Yeah,
though.
no, I'm not talking about the rules. I was just looking at the schedule, so I was wondering, if you have the award in December and the construction starts in January, and by March, the contractor's complete, and in April, we're going to be doing volunteers. So by then, we must know who the gardeners are going to be, I guess. So I think we want to be looking forward to make sure we give the gardeners enough notice.
Absolutely.
And have that application process completed so that they have the chance to come in. And I'm just wondering if you've given any thought, or is that another presentation of how will we allocate? Will the current gardeners have a guarantee that they're going to get a spot, and then the people on the wait list? You don't have to answer right now, but those are the kind of things I think we want to make sure that everybody knows.
Yeah, we already know the existing gardeners already have are grandfathered in to have first right for the plots that they gave up when we deconstructed the garden. Beyond that, we have the waiting list, and our plan is to honor that existing waiting list.
So person by person on the list.
Exactly.
They're not going to go into a whole group and.
No, and then we'll, as in the order that they became a part of that waiting list, we'll select to offer a plot. There'll be a certain amount of time that we'll ask people to respond, and if they don't respond through the application process, we'd have to go on to the next person. But it's absolutely vital that every plot is gardened and actively gardened.
Right. And is there any opportunity for a gardener to say, which particular plot they want to garden?
There are a few that have already made a request based on the desire to not be with raised gardens. I need to defer that to the supervisor and the coordinator who's running the program. I don't want to speak for the work they may have already done.
And the ADA plots, what is the criteria for that?
Individuals that will tell us that they have a need for a particular plot. I haven't really given thought to asking to see documentation at all, but clearly if there are individuals that request that their plot be one that is ADA, then we've got to work through that.
So I guess the only situation where maybe the plots would not be gardened could be if we don't have enough applications for the ADA plots, because we would probably reserve those if another ADA applicant came in. Is that?
That's kind of a policy decision that frankly we haven't talked about at this point.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand the tactics and make sure the gardeners are comfortable with what's going to happen.
Yeah, we'll follow the best practices from our neighbors around the area with community gardens.
And what's the fee for a gardener to be able to garden a plot?
I have to tell you that it is fairly minimal, but I really don't know off the top of my head. Yeah.
About $80.
Thank you. Yeah, it's going to be minimal. It's going to be somewhere in that category.
And there's, so with that, is there is it just in the maintenance budget? Is that subsidized by the city? What it's going to take for the city to maintain the fences and everything else?
Yes, there will be a subsidy, although I'm not sure until we know what our operating cost for the garden will be. But there will be somewhat of a subsidy, absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Go ahead.
One more quick question on the 300K. So how much have we already spent on the neighborhood community research, whatever we plan to do?
To date, we haven't expended any of those funds.
Okay. Another question is that 75K is an overage. That's as of now. Can that be tapped from this 300K? Is it a provision available, or this is
That's
exclusive?
one potential solution.
Okay, thank you.
So I think echoing what Carol had said a little bit, or not said, but the questions I had were very similar, so I'm not going to reiterate them just because I remember seeing them before. Have we considered any kind of other alternative garden planting systems outside of the traditional raised bed with irrigation pipes?
Not really, no.
Okay. All right. Are there any blue cards from the audience? Is there anyone in the audience who has thoughts that they would like to share on this? If you would like to give any recommendations, we have blue cards up at the front on the right-hand side because we can't. Got it. Okay. So there won't be another opportunity to speak on this topic. So with that, we will go ahead and move on to the discussion section. So in terms of discussions, there are many different kinds of beds that are available, not just the ones with the raised beds and then having the irrigation pipe come through. There's some that have, the most effective way to water plants is from the ground up, not from the top down. And so I was wondering what the irrigation structure looks like for these proposed plants, and have we considered using something. Actually, I was working with a company called Avalo, and they basically create beds for community gardens that have a built-in reservoir at the bottom, so that the watering only has to happen at certain times. It's more durable than beds that are right in the ground. It prevents rodent infestation. So I was just wondering if we've considered that, and if not, can we? We technically can't engage with the members of the audience, but it's called an Avalo. AVALOW.
So we did not consider that option when we were looking at the various options. We did look at pre-made kits, sort of off the shelf, that we thought might be cheaper, and they were indeed cheaper in construction. I mean, they were less quality.
So,
But
so
they're-
my concern, candidly, is not cost. I recognize that the nature of this project changed because the powers that be decided that the cost was too great, or they wanted to move funds. That was not a particular concern of mine at the time, nor is it now. But I want to make sure that what we have is durable, and if we have a newer alternative that's more advanced in terms of technology for these gardens, then I would like for us to be able to explore that. The other thing is the way that the garden plots have been broken down. I was wondering if you could reiterate / give a little bit of perspective as to why they're all majority the same size, and if you could talk to why it's structured the way it is. I get that we can't go back to the old design, but why is it so standardized when different growers have the capacity to grow different things?
Good. Yeah, I think I can answer that. The standardization comes because we're not having a contractor build these, and it could become fairly difficult to have multiple size wood cut and gardens built. This is a recreational garden, and so again, we've looked at what the best practices are for other recreational gardens, and the others that we've looked at that seem to work well all have uniform sized plots.
Okay. My other concern, candidly, is with the volunteer aspect of this, and I recognize that you're getting a contradictory directive. So, what Canton's not really contradictory; it's more of just an opinion to a directive you've received. Is there a risk in having volunteers building this that will decrease the quality of these beds and of the garden as a whole?
Yeah, I can try to answer that. No, not really. We're designing these in such a way that they can be built at a very high quality. Again, we looked at other kits that are brought in to construct. We don't see that there will be any loss in quality in this case with the redwood and the volunteers and the master gardeners and such that'll be working on it.
Is there no benefit in having professional contractors come build this garden?
There's absolutely a benefit to having contractors build this.
And what would those benefits be?
They would do it a little bit faster. Their staff is a little bit more trained.
And what does
It would be a less reliance on city staff to prepare the beds. The contractor could do all the cutting, bolting, moving them in position, and it would fit better into the schedule. We could probably save a little bit of time. The downside is the cost. So we're trading cost with volunteer hours.
Okay. I just want it to be very clear and on the record for the community that the decision to move to volunteer base has a cost that isn't necessarily financial. So that's fine. I just wanted that to be listed out. In terms of the project schedule, which might not sound like it, but I'm extremely passionate about this. I really think that the community garden is one of the biggest value adds that we offer our citizens, and I'm very excited that we're bringing it back. In terms of the project schedule, if it's not a dry winter, what does that mean? And do you, in your professional opinion, do you think it is actually worth it for us to start at this time? And I'm putting you in a very difficult position.
It's definitely not ideal to start in the middle of winter. If you look at what has to happen, the first thing that the contractor is going to do is he's going to scrape off about a foot of soil off the entire site, then lay down some hardware cloth, and then put the dirt back on, and then put in the irrigation system. So anywhere along that line, if it starts to rain, you end up having kind of a mud pit. And until that soil can dry out, it'll be hard to work, it'll be hard to move, and it's just going to cause a delay. And I mean, there's things the contractor can do and we can ask them to do. You know, they can spread the soil and try to aerate it and try to dry it out. But if you get a series of storms in a row, like every 3 days, you get measurable precipitation, you're going to be back at square one each time, just waiting for the soil to dry out. So, you know, we've had a bad experience with our McClellan Ranch West parking lot, where we started at the same time of the year. We did some grading, and it rained for 2 months, off and on. And so we were delayed for that period of time until it was dry enough to start. So there's inherent risk when you start building in the winter, especially if you're disturbing soil. So I would say, yeah, if we could afford to delay until the summer, that would be better. But we also know that we've delayed this project for a while, and we'd like to see it done as soon as possible. The longer we delay, the higher the costs go. Costs usually don't drop over time. They usually just go up because labor increases, fuel prices increase, material costs increase. So it's our feeling that if we wait, we won't be able to afford it, and we'll have to make additional cuts.
And the reason we had to postpone was because the city council decision to change the previous plans, correct?
So the original plan, we advertised back in, I want to say September of 2018. We received 3 bids. Each bid was over the engineer's estimate. The lowest bid was $150,000 over the engineer's estimate. The highest bid we received was $600,000 over our $1.5 million estimate. That was something the council didn't feel that they could afford, so they rejected all bids. We went back and redesigned the project, still using contractor forces, but we changed some of the material. We made the raised beds a little bit less robust. We looked at every way we could to reduce the cost. About the time we finished that exercise, the project got defunded. So that was in October of 2018. Just this past June, we were able to get the funding back, but at a lower level. So where we had bids that came in at 1.6 to 2.1, council authorized 1.2 million. So we were trying to manage that scope into that budget, and it's been a little bit challenging, and we're relying heavily on the community and the gardeners to help us out with some of the labor to hopefully save some of that cost and be able to deliver this project.
Great. Thank you for the timeline. That was very helpful. And thank you for your efforts throughout this very long and arduous process.
Great. So, again, I'm not sure what I should say, confusion or even a concern on the project cost items. So maybe let me go over and say, you can help me out. There is if the city staff is designing and providing it, and there is a $110K allocated to the design, what does that mean?
So the design consultant we've hired to revise the design and come up with construction documents, that is their consultant fee. So that is the fee to have them draw this up and prepare the construction documents.
So that cannot be done by the staff. That has to be outsourced to a contractor. Is that
Correct.
I see. And the other one is, again, you put a contingency. I think it's a 10% of the estimate of the construction cost, right? Because it says 813K, and you have a contingency cost of construction contingency 81K. Is it for any delays, as you just talked about earlier on the rain, or any of those delays or overruns? Because you do call about as overage, and I'm trying to find out how this overage, where it come from, what the source of the overage. Is it construction management or the design or contingency, where it is?
So
going
this is
up?
primarily, it's a standard 10% construction contingency, and it's for new and unforeseen conditions. It's for any changes that we make during the construction process. For instance, if we say, well, we want a water spigot at every raised bed, that would be a change, that would add cost. And potentially we could afford that change, but it would depend on how far along we were in the process and how much money we had in that contingency reserve.
Okay, and since in the bidding process, again, I'm not clear on what the bidding process is. It's going to be a fixed cost, we are going to say that, because if you just ask for the bidding now, it can go like the last time when you said 150K or 600K plus, you can have a lot more. And without even deciding, I know the estimate currently it says 813, but based on the bid, it looks like based on the prior history, it may go up, and the overage will go up really high, correct?
That's correct.
So how are
this
we
is our
going
this
to
is our best
mitigate?
estimate of what the costs are.
Yeah.
We won't know what the actual costs are until we get bids in hand.
Correct. The reason I'm asking is that how are you going to mitigate so that we don't want to be in the same situation as we were originally, and then the community members are waiting for it and to get that project going. But if we end up in the same situation, because it's open bid, right? So we are not even saying that this is the maximum amount we can spend on it. So that means it will go up based on the prior history.
So
What mitigation plan do you have that it
there are
won't
some
have?
techniques that we can employ during the bidding process. So we could take a portion of the raised beds or a portion of the garden and make that an ad alternate. So we would have a base bid, which is where we're fairly certain that we could deliver on with the budget we have. And then we could have an ad alternate which adds, say, 10 or 15 additional beds. So if we could get good bids, we could then include that ad alternate and fund the whole program.
Okay, and we haven't considered any other mitigation plan like other commissioners explained to it. There are, again, I'm new to this particular one, learning about it. If there is a lot of community interest, and if the community himself can do, have you already thought about anything which the professional, the construction company, whoever it is, plus our community, a joint project kind of, which can minimize the cost so that we don't risk of delaying it further? Is there any thoughts around it, a combined project?
So I would say for the construction contractors portion of the work, we would need a construction management effort by a third party. For the volunteer effort, that's not necessary, and city resources can manage that process.
Okay. Yeah, again, my just concern, maybe finally it's a concern, is that I think there are too many allocations related to these construction management. I would like to see how best we can avoid the prior scenario, number one, so that we don't get back onto it saying that it's costing 1.6 or 7, whatever, and then go back to the drawing board again, right? And then if you go back to the council, you have no clue on what we are going to get or not, right? That means we are putting all the interest of the community at a point, right? That's the one concern I have. So we need to work on something on the mitigation plans. Number two, since there is a strong interest for the community also to be participating and then helping us, how best we can leverage their interest, enthusiasm into it as a partner project so that we can mitigate all the risks too. That's all I just wanted to share. That's a concern I have. Otherwise, looks like we may end up in going to the same bucket. So, thank you.
I just had one other question with respect to the schedule. So there's 2 months, give or take, for the construction process, and I'm guessing that you must have had some estimate of, there's going to be some rain in there. If we had last year's amount of rain, do we expect that this would work? If we have, how big is the risk in terms of, we had an average rain season will be okay, a little bit above, we're in big trouble.
It's kind of hard to answer. You could get all your rain in 1 week
days,
and
yeah.
then 2 months of dry weather, or you can get it every 3 days and you'll be impacted significantly. So, we looked at the average rainfall over the last 10 years. We've identified how many days of rain we think that'll be per month, and we think we can build this within that time frame. But again, it depends on exactly how much rain we get and when we get it. If it happens after we've covered the site and we've got the pathway down and then it starts to rain, the impact isn't nearly as severe as if we've pulled away a foot of dirt and then it starts to fill up with water and we have now a mud hole.
So basically, you took the last 10 years as your
Yeah,
guideline.
we've
Okay.
averaged that out over the last 10
answers
years, and
the question. Thanks.
Awesome. So The other challenge, you have our thoughts. Do we need to provide you with a formal approval for this?
No,
Okay.
not necessarily. We wanted to make sure that we got, before we do anything more with the design, we've got your input.
Great. So, I mean, it seems like we have been put into a situation collectively, I don't mean us, I mean collective, us at this, have been put into a situation where we don't particularly have many more options because of the nature of other decisions that were made. So we have to go with this structure for the garden at these price points for previously mentioned reasons.
I would say that the only other option we have is if you direct us to reduce the number of plots to help try to bring the cost down. But I would prefer to leave the design as is, use the add alternate approach, and kind of hope for favorable bids. And then if we can add those in, then we will. If not, at least we deliver most of the garden and, at least build something.
Great, that sounds good. Go ahead.
So given all these discussions, is it a way, can we make it as a phased approach too? As you just talked about it, I was thinking about how many 115 plots you said. When we really declare that, okay, if they go on a phased manner, finishing it up maybe around 80 of them, and we see that, oh, the overage is going up, and we know that costs are over, we know that we'll be monitoring. Is there any way in the provision of the bid or any of the process where it says, okay, I think we reached a state, and since we don't have funding, can we stop at that place and then make it? I know you have a phase 2 in your diagram. Within the 115 itself, can you do, is a bid process will provision us to stop at that point, saying that, okay, we have done so much, not the base preparation, but at least all those, is there anything available to you?
So this is where I would use the base bid plus add alternate approach, where
Okay.
we could say, okay, I want you to build the first 80 or
Okay,
90,
got it.
and then
Great.
maybe the add alternate would be the remainder.
Okay,
We could do that, and I think that would be a safe and prudent thing to do.
Yeah.
Just so that we can deliver at least on a portion of it.
exactly. Because instead of like, if it is all or none, why not help the community members? If you go on a phased and say that, okay, that's what we are thinking that safely, we can hit 80 and then go into the alternate. Yeah, that'll be great. Yeah, thank you.
Do you have any last comments? Excellent. I would defer to your very good best judgment. Thank you very much, and thank you again for your very long, very diligent hard work over this course of changing tides. Much appreciated, and the community appreciates all of your efforts. Thank you. Excellent. We are going to go ahead and move on to business item number 3, receive presentation and provide feedback on the department performance measures and workload indicators for fiscal year 2019 and 2020.
Okay. Commission, Christine Hannell, Assistant Parks and Recreation Director, is here tonight to present these to you. We're always very interested in benchmarking our progress, in evaluating how we're doing and looking at being a more data-driven organization. The presentation you hear tonight will be exactly that, for where we were, where we've gotten to over the last fiscal year in terms of some very particular things that we measure. We thought it would be really good to have this discussion with you at this point.
Good evening. I'm Christine Hannell, Assistant Director of Parks and Recreation, and I'm thrilled to be here tonight. I'm going to be chatting with you all about our department performance measures and our workload indicators. And these are items that can be reviewed in the budget document So for yourselves or anybody in our viewing audience, after this presentation or at any time, they can certainly go to the city website and they can view this information. So I just wanted to share that with everyone. I know that the commission has had an interest and has inquired about performance measures in the past. And I did want to preface my presentation with the fact that I anticipate that these performance measures will be changing as we move forward. We have developed performance measures over the last several years. The particular ones that I'm going to be sharing with you, we've only had for 3 years. And I think as we're moving forward, we've spoken with the budget team, and I expect that we're going to be expanding these and adjusting them as we move forward. But I thought it was important, Jeff thought it was important that you see what we are currently working with. So I just wanted to let you know that we are beginning the budget process, if you can believe it, next month in November. So we will already be having discussions with the budget team and our own department team about our measures. So these will change. So I will be back probably, I anticipate, in probably spring, summer, to give you some updates on how we're progressing along. So with that being said, let me go ahead and get started. The department has 5 performance measures, and I'm going to go ahead and just, can you hear me okay? I'm going to go ahead and just explain a little bit about the methodology behind each of these. Again, these were developed back in 2017 by the prior business manager that we had, with some feedback and input from the leadership team at that time. The numbers that you see here, as I said, are the same ones that you will see in the budget document. We are currently bringing these numbers up to date. So you will note when you are looking through these that this last fiscal year, we still are going to be putting together the last half of the last fiscal year, which would be January through June of 2019. And that's mainly because we've had some personnel changes and some reorganization, so we want to bring all this up to speed. But this is what I currently have to share with you. So the first measure is the percentage of customers surveyed that rated services as good or better. And I would say this is probably the performance measure that we're the most proud of. Our target for that was 85% satisfaction. I'm going to go back here. And you can see there we've exceeded that. And this performance measure captures the customer satisfaction with activities, classes, camps, facility rentals, and memberships. That would include programs such as aquatics, special events, classes, after-school enrichment that we used to have at the start of this, senior center classes, etc. And basically what we are asking on our surveys is point blank, how satisfied are our customers when we are sending out the surveys? And we conduct our surveys. There's handwritten surveys, which are done, that are pretty popular at the senior center. We also utilize SurveyMonkey, that we send out surveys as well after an event or a class has been completed to assess a customer satisfaction. The next one is percentage of programs that meet minimum registrations. And this is important because this is an indicator to us as to how well our programs are being received by the public. It also is an indicator if we are meeting our financial goals and whether or not a program is recovering costs. The target on that is 80% of our classes we would like to be meeting minimum registrations. That is an area that we are challenged by and trying to figure out why some of our programs are not meeting those minimum registrations, and that's kind of an ongoing challenge. And I'll talk little bit about how we're moving forward to try to resolve that. The third one is the total cost recovery for all of our programs. And this is an indicator of our financial well-being as a department, and our target for that is a 40% cost recovery. Again, I do want to point out that center column, that was during a year when in the spring of May 2018, when our system crashed. So our numbers there, that's why there's an asterisk for those. The fourth performance measure is the number of new programs and events offered. And this is really an indication of how creative we're being, our willingness to take risks and try new things, so that we don't get into become stale and just kind of in a lull. So we're always pushing for new things in the department and encouraging staff to try new things. Now, the methodology behind this one is, if we're offering a watercolor class on Mondays and Wednesdays, and we decide to offer a class on a Thursday for watercolor, that would not define a new class. So new sessions are not included, but a totally new class idea. So if we went from watercolor to maybe oil painting, that would be considered a new class offering, okay? And we strive for 50 new activities a quarter. So that is departmentally. And that is attainable. We have 4 divisions, and so that does include not only classes, but any type of new special event that we might be offering. So I think we've done pretty well in accomplishing that. The last one is the percentage change in participants. And this performance measure gauges the results of staff's efforts to provide quality service and to retain our customers. And we strive to increase by 1% each quarter in doing that. Next, I want to talk about the workload indicators, and this is something fairly new that we've included in the budget document. And the way it's split up is by our divisions. However, I do want to point out that what is reflected here is 3 divisions, and I'll point out there's one of the divisions that is really a combination of 2 of our current divisions, and that is one thing moving forward that we will be expanding on and correcting. Again, we had done a reorg in the spring, which was after we worked on our budget documents and such. So one of the workload indicators, the one that is showing on the screen, is for the Business and Community Services Division. This is really the division right now that is overseeing festivals and reservations at the Quinlan Center and at Community Hall. The first workload indicator is the number of reservations that are processed at the Quinlan Center. The second workload indicator is the number of festival applications that are received in the front office. These are important because this helps us moving forward when we are developing our budget documents to determine what sort of resources we need. So I anticipate, like I said, moving forward, that we'll be coming up with more workload indicators. This is the one that's combined, recreation and education, which has now been split into, and I'm probably not going to remember the correct names, senior and wellness, and I think youth and teen, or youth and outdoor sports, youth and thank you, ma'am. So this is actually the reflection of 2 divisions. This is the number of registrations. This is, at the time when this was put together, was pertaining to the youth and teen program offerings, as well as the number of survey respondents. The next two are specific to the senior center. The number of classes that are offered, as well as the number of trips that are offered. That last column is for a half year, so that's why you will notice somewhat of a difference there. The next division is Sports Safety and Outdoor Recreation Division. The total number of programs being offered by that division, the number of picnic reservations that are processed out at Blackberry Farm specifically. The next one is the number of rounds of golf at the Blackberry Farm golf course. And then the last one is the number of sports center memberships that we have annually. And that concludes the information. I do want to share with you and just remind the commission as well that next month on November 18th, we have a special meeting planned. And the real purpose of that meeting is we'll have an opportunity to hear from the consultant that will be doing an overview and we'll be evaluating our programs, our operations, our marketing techniques, and we'll have a representative here from the Learning Resource Network. The acronym for that is LEARN. They'll be arriving November 13th, which is a Wednesday. This individual will be meeting with staff, taking a tour. We'll be reviewing all the data that we're providing to them prior to their arrival. And then on the 18th, you will hear the results and the recommendations that they are making to the department. So that's why I say a lot of the performance measures we're hoping, especially on ideas on how to maintain those minimum registrations or trying to determine why maybe we're not meeting minimum registrations, trying to figure out how to improve our cost recovery. We're really hoping that that project is going to provide us some valuable information so that moving forward, we'll be able to improve things and to ensure that our department will continue to be sustainable in the years ahead. That concludes my information. Do you have any questions, comments?
When do we not?
Well, that's true.
So let's make sure to keep this short and sweet with clarification questions.
Let me go here. I'll try to make it short and sweet. On the performance measures, the first table, 40% cost recovery is the goal. And does that mean, since the recovery is more, does that mean we have surplus budget? Because if it's a 40%, I just want to understand, if it's a 40% is the cost recovery is the target, that means you are budgeted accordingly. And if the recoveries are like more, does that indicate that we have surplus, budget surplus?
Well, and Jeff, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I take that to mean that there's less subsidy from the general fund that is occurring.
Okay.
Yeah, what it means for me is that we have more revenue that folks have a higher willingness to pay for a demand on services, and that we're also controlling our costs. So the question is, does that mean we have a surplus in funds? Absolutely. That's the end result to it, and we have in the past seen fairly substantial budget savings at the end of each year. And that, for us, means that we're trying to do as much as we can, as efficiently as we can, with the least strain on our taxpayer revenue as possible.
Okay. I'll reserve some other questions for discussion time. The second question I have is on the performance measure, second table, the number of programs which we offer, the target is 50, but starting in 2017 and 18, it's all like at least twice, or if not even 3 times going up. Is there a reason why it is kept as 50 for the last 3 years, in spite of 2017 and 18 and 19, where we could offer much more. Is there a reason why it is still kept? The reason behind my question is it budget allocated to only 50 programs, but we are offering more?
Right. That's the performance measure that we set back in 2017. So we have actually kept these the same just so that we can see how we were trending and how we were doing. So that's why I had mentioned as well that I anticipate that we're going to be relooking at these. We put them in place to see between now and 2020 how we were doing. But I think you bring up a very good point that it's on one like that where we are continually exceeding the target number. We should think of ways to stretch ourselves and to relook at that.
Okay, thank you. Next one is that plus 1% of the percentage participation or participant changes. It says target is plus 1%, but I see most of them are, especially this year, it's 67%. Is that a good or bad? Because plus 1% is what we set the target that we allow the flexibility, but now it says 67%. I'm
Right.
trying to understand, is it a good
Right.
or bad
Now,
indicator?
last year, the second half of the year could have stabilized that. That does, when I pulled that up, that was the data that was provided. But I will have to double check on that because I think you bring up a good point. What we're trying to do there is we're trying to sustain our current customers and add to our customer base is what we're striving to do there.
Okay. And the other one on the workload indicators, I didn't see any target. I see that the performance indicators, but is there any target we are going to set or we are just going to measure and report it? What is the baseline we will refer against on this workload?
Right. This was the direction that we were given at the time from the budget team to come up with these workload indicators in terms of what were the items that we wanted to, going forward, that we wanted to monitor. And so this is how we were directed to put it together, so we don't have a target on these necessarily.
Okay. The next one is on the next table where the number of survey respondents, it says not available or not applicable for the 2019, but I do see in the first table, it says 97% positive results, good or bad, or good or excellent. Why then we have a not applicable number of participants responded on it? How did we arrive the first number of 97?
Right. We just don't have the full year on that one. We don't have the second half of the year on that one. So that's why we did not record a full year's worth for the number of survey respondents.
Okay, it says July to December, so that's why my question.
Right. Right.
Okay.
No, I understand what you're saying. We probably could have just put in the 97 that reflected the July through December period.
Because the 97 is calculated based on some numbers, then this should have some data.
Right.
Yeah, it cannot be then, I don't know where the 97 comes from.
Right. Got it.
Yeah. That's pretty much I have, then we will, thanks.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not sure these are questions, but maybe comments. Maybe under the performance measures, that was your second table.
Well,
For your,
sorry, seeing as there's no blue card, we can move into discussion.
discussion and questions
Yeah.
together. The ongoing target, you mentioned like the 50 was 50 per quarter, but the measures, were those for the full year? Those weren't per quarter, is that right? And then the ongoing target of plus 1%, you said that was per quarter, and I'm guessing the measures were for the full period?
That is an excellent point. I would need to go back and confirm that with the data that I'd have to see if I still have that. Again, I didn't put together those first 2 years, but yes, I would need to go back and double check on that.
Okay. Yeah,
I'm thinking I believe that it's an annual number, but I would need to double check on that.
for the actual results,
Right.
except for the
The
July
target
through
was 50
December.
quarterly.
Right.
But the 132, I believe, is reflecting that entire year for
Right.
what's in the first column.
Right. And so I'm thinking maybe the other thing is when you're representing FY 2019, July through December, is that the period we're in right now, or is that from a year ago? Because we're in 19 and 20.
Yes, the fiscal years that are reflected there is the second half of the year. So the first column is 16-17, 17-18, and 18-19.
18-19. So
Right. So that is, you're right, that is for last fiscal year.
Okay, so I'm wondering why last fiscal year it only shows 6 months. It seems like, is that because the data from the first 6 months of this year weren't
Right.
available?
Right. We have the data that the individual staff has, but it has not been compiled. Just like for this fiscal
Oh,
year
okay.
right now, when we meet in November, we will have the data for this first quarter. It was just due to the personnel changes and the changes in assignments that we didn't compile the data from the second half of last fiscal year.
Yeah.
But again, that will be updated in preparation for the work that we're doing with the Learn group.
Yeah. I just think, yeah, maybe there's some way, because the fiscal year and the year when you're talking about the last 6 months, the number of the year is wrong. I mean, it doesn't correspond, really, because fiscal year 2019, July through December is really July through December of 2018, right? So.
Yeah, I understand.
that's
Again,
a little confusing.
this is consistent with the budget document.
I understand.
But I know, yeah.
Okay.
I think maybe in the,
Yeah, so that's just.
like,
yeah,
you know how
it's just
oftentimes you see, it'll say
presentation stuff.
FY 16-17, so then it's, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, and then I just wonder, your perception, if we've done a lot of automation in registrations, we have a whole new system, how has that impacted our registrations? Does it make sense to be doing the same comparisons like the registrations at Quinlan? Aren't we doing a lot more online now?
Yes, we are doing a lot online. I hopefully will have that information after we see the first quarter. It was just yesterday was our 1-year anniversary since we went live with the new software. So we'll be able to compare that.
Yeah, I think
So
that'll be very
again, we'll have that,
interesting. Yeah.
that information available here in the next month or so.
Yeah, and that may have some implications for workload when we're saying it's automated now. I mean, the numbers are a lot higher, but it's automated, so what is the implication of that for the workload?
Yeah, that was actually going to be exactly what I was going to bring up.
Sorry to take your
No, that's
points.
That's fine. I appreciate being on the same wavelength. Yeah, I think that automation will likely have a pretty drastic impact on workload and workflow. So I would be curious to see the results of that and the analysis, and then also a correlation, a like kind of crossover examination between, how that's impacted things in the past year versus previous years, in the fiscal year format rather than the confusing partial format. Yeah, that was my biggest thing.
Okay, so I do have a few things. So I think when I look at the percentage of programs meeting minimum requirements, we set a goal of 80%, and we were not able to meet at all, like 70, and 59, whatever it says. Is it, again, a correlation, or the data is indicating that there are too many programs are being offered? For example, if I look at I'm not saying that we should not, but I'm trying to find out where is that we need to do. Offering more programs to the community members is awesome. At the same time, if you're setting a bar because the switch rates are increasing from +1 to 69, at the same time, if I see this year itself, if I just take July to December, we already offered 722. It indicates now, if I'm reading correctly. In the last 6 months, that's the last workload indicator, number of programs offered. is 722 in the 6 months. Is that right? Which is equivalent to the whole year of 2017 and 18 prior to it. That means we are like doubling the number of programs. One way it's a good news. But is it, there are two questions along with it. Is the budget has been allocated to it, number one? Number two, is it because too many of those programs, we couldn't meet the minimum requirements of people registering it? Because you have too many options. That means I'm not sure which indicator we need to follow. Because if you say that 80% of the programs have to meet the minimum requirement, I think the speed at which the programs are going, it's going to be always hard. And I don't want to take that as a bad indicator to assess the performance of the department or the staff who really work hard on putting so many programs, so many options. So it's a contradicting, and you're going to fight between these two. The staff is going to be really weighed on this one. So that's a concern I have. The indicators are conflicting each other.
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
it-
And I think that's a struggle that we have. You know, it's, you're always trying to stay fresh and new, but you're exactly right. If classes aren't filling, that is a challenge, if we're not meeting our minimum requirements. And that's what we're trying to understand, because it's like you don't know what you don't know. So if a class doesn't fill, a lot of times it's hard to determine why it didn't fill, because you don't have the survey results, right? As you do when you get somebody in the door, you're able to at least ask them, well, how was your experience? How did we do? What can we change? But when they never sign up, it's hard to attain that information. And so oftentimes what we would do, for example, we were offering a class and it didn't go, and we suspect that there's interest, because maybe we've heard from people that there's an interest, we might change the time or the day or the age offering. We might look at it or call a colleague in another city and ask them and try to figure out, well, why didn't this class go when it's going in one of our neighboring cities? And so we'll make those slight changes. Sometimes we're successful, sometimes we're not. And I'm really hoping when the gentleman from Learn comes to visit, he's able to provide some insight to that, try to give us some indication of things that we need to look at that maybe somehow we're missing. If you walk through our buildings, for example, there are times of day when the buildings are packed, and then there's other times, right, where it's not. And you question now. There's some very logical explanations for that. For example, during the weekday when school is in session, you're not going to have many children in classes. You might see more adults at that time. But then there are other times when you just can't quite figure out, why is that happening? What is the reason behind it? So those are conversations that we have a lot. We have them amongst the leadership team, the staff themselves, but again, I'm hoping that that we'll be able to learn a little bit from our next month when we go through this process.
Yeah, that'll be great. I think the reason I ask all these questions, how best we in the commission can help. If there is more insights into these drop-offs. I personally registered my son to go to many things, and then I got a call from Sports Center saying that, hey, we have only 3 people, so we have to cancel it, right? We cannot. So been through it many times. But that's why maybe the time of the day, as you exactly said, may not be meeting it. So it'll be great if you could get that insights after November, whenever you have your internal discussions. It'll be good to see that, so that we can see, is there any way we can help on identifying it? Because you're putting through the staff on a preparation, because that's going to be equal, whether the program meets a minimum requirement or not. The staff is going to put the same amount of effort in preparing for it. And then it'll be disappointing for them too, and see that, oh my God, I put in all the effort in there, looks like it's getting canceled, or, right? So how do we avoid so that their effort can be really utilized in the successful programs? So we need to either maybe slow down in those programs, on the timings, on the dates, or what kind of programs. It'll be great to see it. I definitely would love to see, once you finish it, let us know. That'll be great. And again, all these questions are just to help. This amazing number of programs are skyrocketing, but how best we can help so that it is all successful and meeting the minimum requirements.
And I appreciate that. And, I just want to share with the commission and anybody watching, we really value the input. So again, especially for folks that are watching from home, if there's an offering that it's in our brochure and they're not taking it for a particular reason, like for example, they really wish if it was offered on Thursday afternoons, even though the choice is made not to register, we still want to hear from you. It would be so helpful if community members would call and provide that feedback to us. Because again, we don't know how many customers, we're necessarily losing, right? Or why they didn't make the decision to register for a particular program. So it's helpful to us. All this information is very helpful.
Thank you. Again, I sincerely appreciate the staff putting through all the programs and making the 97% of the satisfaction. It's amazing. I haven't seen it, so many programs hitting at 97% response. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, as Gopal's going through these performance measures, I'm looking at them a little more carefully too. And there's one that seems contradictory, or there's two of them that seem contradictory, and that's that the percentage of programs that meet the number of registrations were way below our target, but the percentage of total cost recovery is way above our costs. So, and the target. So those seem contradictory to me.
But if in general, like as a whole, we're basically dealing with like partial information in segments that aren't aligned in terms of time, then we can't really effectively compare.
But a percentage of what's happening, it shouldn't really matter on.
Yeah, but if
the
it's
time
not
frame.
the actual time frame, right? If it's one is only measuring at 6 months and one is measuring at
Yeah, if it's not the same. It just seems contradictory.
Yeah, I think we can extrapolate, assuming that we get the double, assuming that the same thing is going to continue.
Yeah.
Then I think it will be the same as.
Yeah, it just seems odd that we're not meeting the minimum registration requirements, but we're beating our goal for total cost recovery. So
Maybe I could comment. One of the concerns that we have across the country is that we have coordinators that do a great job being creative and creating new activities and new opportunities. But sometimes we don't say that the lifespan of a particular program, class, or activity is already done. And we figure, well, okay, let's see, something that was popular back in, a class in how to use a flip phone could be a good example. And that may have been very, very popular back in 1987 or 1992. But today, nobody has them. The concern is that class has been let go, that we've taken it out of our program brochure. If we continue to advertise introduction to flip phones, we have a percentage issue there. I'm kind of poking fun at it with the flip phone, but the reality is people take a lot of personal pride and investment in different kinds of program activities. But there is a certain point at the end of a life cycle for a program that we do need to remove it from the offering so that we can dedicate ourselves to new and innovative ideas. And it's juggling that as well that is sometimes a challenge. The marketing plan, as Christine told you, the program review will look at exactly that, and the consultant who is an expert will be here to explain to you, what they see, what his observations are as far as the right mix of programs and activities, and so I look forward to that in that special meeting in November.
thank you.
Okay. Anything I say is redundant. No, I'm just kidding. So the other thing that I did want to understand is in terms of projections for the next set of the next few years. Where do you see, I guess, the biggest growth potential? I'm just curious in terms of actual recreation offerings, and yeah.
I'm going to let Jeff chime in on this, but from what we are hearing right now, people are living longer. So therefore, senior services are going to continue. There's going to be a demand, and they're going to continue to grow. and we're going to need to be able to keep up with that trend. That's the biggest area that I'm hearing. Jeff just came back from the conference, so I don't know if there's anything beyond that, but that seems to be nationally what is being talked about.
Exactly. There's a number of trends that are coming and going out in different cities. But Christine is absolutely right. The senior population is growing. That's an area that we're really going to need to focus. We'll be wanting to focus to meet demands for outside park service as well. In other words, as we have population growth in the city, our parks are being used in a much more dense environment. And so we need to be thinking, we've got a lot more dogs that live in the community. How do we meet their needs? As the community continues to evolve and change, we need to be thinking about how can we temporarily add things, add programs or activities within the parks, maybe at different times. Or maybe we need to be thinking about fitness programs within the parks to provide people greater access. There's a whole number of different things that we need to be thinking about in terms of demand. And frankly, the master plan did a really good job of identifying those, and the strategic planning process that we're about to start will prioritize those.
Okay. The other thing, two things I wanted to just chat about real briefly. Are there any externalities that can explain, lower usage for Blackberry Farm picnic?
I think you were referring to the workload indicator.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about the picnic reservations?
Yeah.
Well, my apologies. There should have been an asterisk. So in the fiscal year, the middle column, 17-18, that's when we crashed. So there, we were able to regain what we could. And then that third column, again, is a half year. So I will need to actually check on that. I can actually get the actual numbers from the supervisor out there and share that with you.
Great.
Just to see whether or not they're actually, well, again, I won't be able to speak to the 17-18 fiscal year, but to last fiscal year, we can get that final number.
Yeah, that would be great. We do so much development. We built the new parking lot, and I just want to see if we can figure out it, and if there's any kind of correlation that makes it possible for us to, increase the usage of different facilities.
Yeah.
I do believe they intentionally limited some of the reservations on the big weekends, 4th of July, to make sure that they don't have overflow parking into the neighborhood, because that's been an issue ongoing since forever.
Yeah.
And so I know that was an active
Yes, you're right.
managerial
Yes.
decision.
Yes, depending on, you're right, that when the reservation is being made, we're assessing how many, because remember, a reservation, you could reserve a picnic site for 12 people, or you could reserve it for the maximum, which might be 40 or 50. So oftentimes staff is inquiring about that, so we do get a gauge on what the impacts will be to parking to try to reduce the overflow. So, yes.
Yeah, and I think the last couple of years, there has been maybe one or no days of overflow. And that's been a conscious decision. That means we're not accepting reservations into the park because we're trying to limit overflow. So it's balancing act.
Yeah, and I do think it's important to just make sure that we note these kinds of things for the public as well, so they don't think that those numbers are low. They're actually not necessarily low. They've been modulated for a specific need. So we're not really comparing, 200 open spots to 200 open spots. We're comparing 200 open spots to 170 open spots. So percentage-wise, we might still be higher than we were previously. And then I know that I'm still a little confused about this whole calendaring thing. But if you could just talk me through the golf course rounds of golf. So I know that 2018-19, third column on the right is half a year. What is can you just describe the discrepancies between the two or the lack thereof?
Well, I can give you.
Yeah. This is just completely my confusion, and I recognize that.
Yeah. We've been last fiscal year, we did 27,000 rounds of golf. Over the last 5 years, we've been from 25,000 to 30,000, and that fluctuates based on a number of different things, including popularity of the sport. When one certain golfer tends to win important major golf tournaments, golf rounds skyrocket immediately.
Who?
I think his name is Tiger.
Interesting. People's values. Cool. Okay, I was just curious as to what you thought the ups and downs were. That's it. That's it in terms of questions. As long as we, like, in the future, just, even if it's not something that you put in the presentation, but we just, like, mention the externalities, that'll be good, just so I know that I have that reference point.
Yeah.
Also, it's good for the staff to know, too. It's not like people aren't using facility. They might be. It's just not available for certain days. Okay, excellent. Any other thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, feedback?
No, one final comment. Thank you, Christine. That was a very good presentation. The performance indicators and the performance measures you saw tonight really focus just on recreation, and of course the department is also responsible for parks. So in the strategic planning process, we'll be talking to you much more about the performance indicators for parks. They're a little slower to change. For instance, we like everybody to live within a 10-minute walk of a park, but the reality is only 60% of Cupertino residents fall into that category, just because it's hard to purchase land in certain areas. But we'll be looking at the number of the amount of square footage of facilities per our population. We'll be looking at the number of basketball hoops, say, for our population. We'll be looking at different kinds of measures to know that the amount of things we have in the parks and the amount of parks we have are appropriate for our community. So kind of stay tuned on that. It's going to be some exciting, really interesting information to come.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Christine. This is fantastic. It was very helpful. And looking forward to some more measures and workload indicator updates later. Awesome. We are going to go ahead and move to business item number 4 to receive a presentation on the second Cupertino Youth and Teen event. Come on up.
Just gonna pull up the presentation here. Might not be on. Oh, it's not? Oh, sorry. That is. Can you check color to this one here? Green.
Oh, the green button. I'm sorry.
All right, perfect. There we go. Hello, everyone. How is everyone doing tonight? I hope everyone's doing well. Thank you all for having me back here again. I think the last time I was here, I was here to talk to you guys about the Cupertino campout. Well, tonight I'm here to talk to you about a second event that we did called Cupertino. And our first year was last year. And so I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with it, but last year, what had happened was it was clear that teen stress is an ongoing issue. So the Teen Commission partnered with the mayor's office to try and connect teens to these of valuable mental health resources. Well, the question was, how exactly do we get teens to come out? And thankfully, a lot of Cupertino teens love milk tea. And so we kind of put two and two together, and that is what started this event. So here I have a video for everyone of how, of very quick kind of speed run of video of our line and of the event itself. I hope everyone took their motion sickness medicine, because it is a little shaky, but yeah, let's see. So that's our line, and it was held out here right outside the Civic Center. As you can see, the line was pretty long. It went up until the staff entrance of City Hall, and this is a view of the event itself. That's our boba line right there. So kids lining up for their treasure of choice. And yeah, that's a very quick video of the event for everyone. But as with the Cupertino campout, we did want to identify some core goals of what the event itself was trying to address. Yes, we were aware of the concept of teen stress, but we wanted to expand it a little bit more. The next thing that I'll be going over is the event itself, and then going over our survey results and where we want to take this event next year. So before I get into goal one, I've been taking a step back here, and I've started to ask myself exactly what is our role as an agency. I think when it comes to teen stress, we have to ask ourselves, what are we doing when it comes to teen mental health? And how do we as a Parks and Rec agency do what we can? Very quickly, the answer itself is something that it's a very multifaceted issue. It's no issue that one organization or one agency can truly answer or solve. I know as an example, for the Fremont Union school district, they have a wellness council, which I serve on, and the main goal is to try and help address the issue of teen stress. But through that wellness council, we have students, we have parents, we have city staff, and it's clear that the various people are required to help resolve this issue. So what can we as the Parks and Rec department do? And the answer that we are starting to see is that we have to take a more hands-on approach. That means we have to almost be like the boots on the ground army fighting teen stress. So, with that said, our first goal was to foster social development. When speaking to teenagers, it's very clear that in most cases, the opinions of their friends are almost more important than that of their family or their parents. But one interesting thing which has come up, which contributes, I think, more to teen stress, is this idea that peers are competing against each other. Yes, there is some home stress, but more often, what causes stress is when you compare your grade on an exam to that of someone else. So let's say your friend gets an A and you get an A-. In this area, that almost translates to I'm a failure and I can't compete with my peers. One of the first goals that we had was to create these positive memories for teens. So connecting them with a good support group and creating those lasting memories. And that led into our second goal, which you might recognize from the camp out, which was the power of recreation. There are continual studies that show that there is an intrinsic value of being outside and having an active lifestyle. And that is what our job is to bring recreation to students. I think, especially again in this area, school is the thing that takes number one priority, and everything else is kind of secondary. So that includes sports and being outside. And the only time you honestly do sports is because it adds something to your college portfolio. So what we try and do is to try and subtly include recreation into what we do at our events. And so as part of our mobile rec offerings, we have cornhole, ping pong, giant Jenga, giant Connect 4, and some new additions this year included slack line and volleyball and badminton. I was honestly kind of concerned for slack line because I wasn't sure if it was something that was going to be very popular. However, it was used nonstop. So that was a big, very happy surprise for me. And then the third goal of the event was to again connect teens to valuable resources. This year, we wanted to expand that to just be more than mental health. So we included school clubs and city organizations such as the Safe Routes to School program. All right, so on to the event itself. We increased the amount of milk tea from 500 last year to 700. We had mobile offerings, a photo booth. One advantage of moving the event from Main Street to the Civic Center was that we could have amplified sound. And this year, as an improvement from last year, we included a passport support, because what we had found last year was that teens came to the POBA and then they left. So our booths weren't as necessarily popular as they were this year, because we required them to go to at least 5 booths before getting free POBA. So our booths saw traffic nonstop, and I think they really appreciated that. In terms of the booths, we had some tech booths, mental health booths, some other schools support groups. We had an art collective that did calligraphy to show the value of art therapy, and the Sports Center and Safe Routes to School program. When we got our survey back, or actually I should start off by saying that we had over 600 teens in attendance. In terms of our survey responses, we did get 115 surveys, and 96.5% rated it as good or excellent. And here's a word cloud of what they enjoyed most. It's not a shocker that the two things are boba and food, but also friends, booths, games, and activities. And then in terms of things that they want us to improve for next year, I like the big red nothing, but also they did give some good feedback on areas that we can improve upon for next year. So talking about next year, in terms of the scope, it's clear to us that that we want to try and expand the scope. The idea of just having mental health resources, I think that's a good idea, but there's more stressors out there that cause teen stress and anxiety. And if there's ways that we can help target those stressors by either connecting them with support groups on campus, or connecting them with like free college prep, not that that's an actual thing, but if there was, it's still the idea of college is something that causes worry and anxiety, and helping to facilitate those anxiety-inducing stressors or things that we want to target for our next year. So we're trying to have more booths and finally more recreation activities. Because as we see time and time again, if you have ping pong players set up playing Jenga, they naturally gravitate towards that stuff. It's things that they enjoy, and they might not realize that they enjoy it until they see it and engage. And that is the exact kind of subtle teaching that we are trying to do. So some upcoming programs that we have coming up are Santa visits. We bring a Santa to your home, and it occurs on these dates here. We have the Cupertino Cafe, which is inspired, well, it was created by the Youth Activity Board, and what we do is we open the Quinlan Center as a study space, and that's occurring during finals in December. And finally, we have the spelling bee. For this year, it's going to be for 2nd through 6th graders, if I remember correctly. And it's going to be on Saturday, January 25th, here at Community Hall. And that's it.
Excellent. Since there are, unless either of you would like to put in a blue card, no? Okay. We'll go ahead and jump straight into discussion with questions as well. We're not going to have a clarifying question section. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was on that day and
I know, I
watching.
saw you,
I know,
yeah.
so it's like, but I tried to sneak in to get a boba. But
Uh-oh.
they said you have to be a teen, so thank
Uh-oh.
you.
Yeah.
I wish I could, and but it was awesome.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic. I was like for almost an hour to just go around and check with some kids and how kind of it's amazing. At the same time, I have some feedback because
Sure.
I was running around and watching few things and then getting into the library as well. There are some feedback. I did talk to some of the library patrons and others. So I just want to give you, because it's really important for us to take the feedback.
Absolutely.
So I know we moved from Main Street. I was there last time too on the Main Street. It was a crowd. It was not that big, but we moved here. But 700 kids or 600 kids teens coming in. The number one is that since we cordoned off this area and it's just with the yellow tapes, I've seen the kids who used to play on the fountains. They wanted to come in, and even though
Right.
there's no water, they were kind to too, and they were trying to open it and come in. And of course, you cannot restrict them. So they were all going inside and then trying to play and find out, and the parents trying to chase them, but there are a lot of teens, and they get lost. So that's a one. So kids, little ones were just trying to sneak in all
Yeah.
places because they just wanted to go and play, and they thought, oh, you're playing something on it, why not me? They had no idea it's Cupertino, it's only for teens, right?
Yeah.
So lot many people getting attracted to it. That's number one. Number two, since because of the loud music, since the doors, there are a lot many movements, the automated door in front of the library was always almost open because of the signal. So you can hear the music in the children's area.
Okay.
So people were like, I couldn't get any quiet place because it's so noisy. But while they liked the celebration outside, but inside people were like complaining, and they're going to the staff and talking about it too, because it is always there. That's number two. And the third one, which I observed, is that the teens, when they walked out and stuff, especially on the area, they were walking out the traffic, the cars, it was kind of unsafe because they were just going out from here to the other side and coming back and stuff. All the cars on the 10 to 8 area, so they were like all stopped and trying to go.
Yeah.
So it's great, it's a growth, but I think this space is not going to meet. Even at this next year, I'm going to show you might go another looks like the growth. It may not be sufficient at all. So I strongly recommend that we need to find a different place. Maybe the library field, which is kind of outside where people are. Otherwise, it's very difficult to control the kids and others coming in. They thought it's a general event, and
Right.
why can't I go?
Right.
And every time you would explain, no, it's only for teens. So it's kind of a commotion at the time. I was just going around on the left and right to tell people, hey, this is great, but it's only for the teens. And because I was told that, hey, you cannot get in. So I thought, okay, let me share the same pain with everyone that you cannot go in, right?
Yeah.
So that would be my recommendation.
Okay.
The patrons were kind of felt too much noise and stuff. So that's the only recommendation I have. I loved the synergy everywhere. All the kids were running around. It's amazing to see it. But if you could take that into a different location preference,
Sure.
would really help.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Go ahead.
How many hours did it run?
From 3 to 7, so 4 hours.
4 hours.
Yeah.
And for food, did you have food trucks? So food was
We-
for sale, but the boba was free? Is that how it worked?
There was no, so everything was free and everything was packaged because we got donations from Trader Joe's, Sprouts, and Whole Foods.
So food was free too? Did they have to get stamps on their passport to get the free food too, or was that
They
just for the?
did not, it was only for
Just for the boba. Okay.
Yeah.
I think the passport was a great idea that really
thank
gets
you.
people moving around and encourages them to
Yeah.
get out of their, I mean, they get to choose. You only had 5 stamps that they needed to get. It sounds like there were a lot more booths than that.
Right.
But at least encourages them not just to hang out
Absolutely.
with their friends and get tea. So I think that's a great idea.
Exactly.
I was wondering if maybe, since stress is a big focus
Mhm.
for this, if maybe you could invite some people who have de-stressing dogs. You know, there's programs, there's community places
We were
that have
looking into
dogs
that.
for,
Yeah.
I don't know, I don't think they're called comfort dogs, but they're
Therapy ones.
therapy
Like a
dogs,
therapy
yeah,
dogs.
yeah. So there are nonprofits that do that.
Right.
And, or even some of the pet stores that have, you know,
Yeah.
kittens, bring a couple litters of kittens and puppies out.
That's
And
awesome.
I'm sure the kids would just love to, you know, take their time to hold them
Yeah.
if they could or whatever.
Yeah, that's surely something that we want to do next year. We had asked the question this year. I think we have to. What needs to happen is there has to be more of a communication with our risk managers, because there is that a potential for animals to react in a certain way that could so but for next year, yeah,
That's
it just requires more ongoing discussions.
Yeah, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it sounds like you're making improvements every year and the turnout speaks for itself.
Awesome, yeah.
I was at the mayor's meeting yesterday and the teen commissioner who
yeah,
was
sure.
there who described it, sounded great. And I
Cool.
went home and described it to my husband and he said, we need a beer batino for adults
I
in
love it.
the community.
At the time, I can say teens are not allowed inside, right? We can say them too.
That's right. So
No,
this
I'm
one's
just
for
kidding.
teens only. The other one will be for the adults. Keep the teens out.
Perfect.
So we might, we need adults working together and having some fun opportunities as well. So
I love it.
All right, Jeff, there you go.
Awesome. So I think I also really like the passport idea. I think that was a great way of getting people to get engaged.
Thank you.
I think, and I, of course, I don't know every single one of the activities that you guys had, but if you had also some kind of like a human bingo, so like find someone who, and it's
Okay.
it's basically like find someone who can speak 3 languages, or find someone who can touch their tongue to their nose, and they can't put like multiple people down, just as a way to get them to connect with each other outside of just their friend groups. I think is great.
Yeah.
And then it would be where's the other thing that I was gonna. Oh, it would be great if when they're they're doing all this, if there's ways that you can, just for marketing purposes in the future, collect quotes. I don't know if you've already done that, but actual testimonials from the people that are there,
Okay.
so that you can use that in the future. I also think that this is such a cool thing to get like local businesses to formally sponsor.
Yeah.
And it would be cool to see if there's some kind of like bigger raffle that we could do with a community partner or something.
Like a local business or
Yeah, like a
Or-
local business, or like Southwest does a bunch of those like give like $100 gift card to wherever you want to fly kind of things. So there's something like that might be really cool. In general, I think this is awesome. I wish this existed when I was in high school. That would have been great.
me too.
Would have
Yeah.
saved a lot of money too. But in general, I think this is really awesome. The last question
Thank
I have is there any kind of long-term feedback loop in terms of like the mental health and wellness for the kids with stress relief? Because it's great to have like singular events, but is there a way that we can like find to not necessarily Bobatino specifically, but just find like smaller ways of keeping in touch with all the people who come and just say, hey, if you come to Cupertino, put your name down on this, we'll send you like a monthly newsletter with tips and tricks to manage your stress. And, you know, we'll have like a fun offer, like you can have Quicklies or whomever just put like a 10% off coupon in the newsletter so they get additional traffic or something like that. But that way you're continuously engaging with these youth throughout the
Okay.
year. Just because I think the event is amazing, but it's a singular day.
Yeah, and that's
And I know the teen commission's been doing a lot on this, so it might be a
Right.
good tie-in.
and that's something that we, like I said, I'm constantly like trying to think of. It's good to have these one-day things, but the stress is going to
Year long.
continuously be there, and we have to give them the skills to manage their stress, to positively manage their emotions, and that's where I'm asking that question is like, how can I use what I'm doing to help solve that answer? And I think the answer to it comes, we have to continue collaborating with the library, city organizations, school districts, because there's a lot of folks who this issue is very important and close to them, but it's not one issue that one agency can answer. But to that effect, I think that we for sure can send out that sort of information.
Yeah, I think just a closing comment. I really love this idea of this being a trigger event or a hub to really create a lot of other events, collaborated with the commissions, as you just said that.
Right.
This is an awesome one. And the
Yeah.
feedback, the only thing is that maybe you should say that, okay, you get an advanced passport stamp for providing more feedback, because I see only 1/6 of them, 115 out of the 600 has given a feedback
Yeah.
survey. So you can say that, okay, if you give feedback, you will get an advance, right, 1 or 2 stamps for the next POP or whatever earlier. So you'll get more, and in that you can specifically ask for what areas they wanted to help on. And I think I love that idea of using this as a forum. You're right, if it is one-off event, they will just wait for the next Bobatina, right?
Right.
And if you use this one as a hub, which will trigger many other things which all commissions should take care of it. And you should tell all the commissions, say that, hey, these are the feedback, and it's get into your plan.
Yeah.
For our plan, what we do, that would be an awesome one.
Okay.
Yeah, I love that idea. Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. And in general, fantastic job. This is
Oh, thank you.
amazing, being able to hand out 700 boba. And that's actually like you multiply, it's 3,500 activities that had to be done to hand out those 700 boba, right? 5 per boba. So
Yes.
that's a lot.
Yeah,
That's
that
a
was-
lot of participation. That's a significant amount of engagement. And that is really cool.
Thank you.
So congratulations on a great event.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I always feel bad that I'm the only one up here, but I can't. I mean, I'm one of a very large team, and I have them to thank for all of our ongoing success. So, thank you.
And don't forget for the adults one. We just recommended it, suggested
For the,
it, we enforced
and
it,
of
please.
course,
Hey, I mean, you know,
for the
Oktoberfest
adults.
exists. We could just do a Cupertino Oktoberfest. Perhaps
Perfect.
perhaps a 2020 project.
Thank you.
Awesome. Why don't we go ahead and move forward? We are pulling item number 5 from the agenda. So we can jump to item number 6, receive the monthly report from the director and commissioners.
Okay. Well, I'll try to be brief, but I do have a number of things I'd like to speak with you about real briefly, or to fill you in on. Since the last time we've met, you should have already received an email that talks to the draft ethics protocol for elected and appointed folks within the city. We'll be looking at wanting to get some feedback, and we will be putting that on the November agenda so that we can discuss it in line with our open meetings rules. Happy to say that after all of the work that was done, the Jollyman Dog Off Leash area is open. It is happening. Dogs are coming and bringing their owners, and it's a good time.
Any feedback so far?
No, only that it's been very quiet.
Got it.
There's one feedback that the signs were made it a very narrow area, and I think they were expecting it, and even the drawings show that it should be larger. And I've been there a couple of days, and so there's been nobody at the baseball diamond. So I think that we could expand it, because you don't want it too intense in that one little area, and it was anticipated to be a little bit larger. So I think if we can get that feedback to, just get the signs where it makes more sense.
Perfect. The city council the other night, we asked to change the work plan to allow us, major efforts with significant staff impact are placed on a list that's prioritized in February, March, and then approved by city council. One of those items is to study the field use policy, and council had asked us to provide options on the golf course. As you know, the golf course receives a subsidy of about $25,000 a month from the city, and our goal for golf courses is for that not to happen, to have a much less or smaller subsidy. However, during the discussion, in order to put it on our work plan, a decision was made for us to actually defer the golf course item and continue the priority that council had set. So we'll be studying and bringing to you options and such, and talking about what do we do in terms of how we reserve and how we permit sports fields, and what the fees should be going forward. The last time we had these discussions was roughly about 15 years ago. In November, we'll be beginning to talk about the work plan for the following year. I know that we had just adopted the work plan for the commission, and we're working on it, and you're working on it, and things are happening. However, in order for things to be included on the city council work plan in the next budget season, we're going to need to have input in the early January phase, or January time. So we'll be coming to you next month with some ideas and beginning to talk about that. And along that same line, we'll be talking with you about capital projects, because we have a set of criteria that you had approved to prioritize those in the master plan, and to be included in the city's capital improvement plan. We'll need to be starting that discussion next month as well. I'm very happy to say that we're in the environmental clearance process on the master plan, and our goal has been, or is, to bring it to council on the 3rd of December, which means that we'll be coming to you again shortly, or in November, to have to talk a little bit about the environmental clearance process as a possibility, because of the way that the city council schedules are, that we may end up to be on the 17th, but I think that we'll be ready on the 3rd to move forward with adoption of the master plan. So the last thing I'd mention is LAFCO with the county continues to work on the options for the Rancho Rinconada Special Recreation District, and we had planned to have a joint meeting with the commission and city council to discuss this on the 7th of January, but due to the date and the holidays, we'll be having to move that date, so stay tuned. We don't know what that date's going to be, but the local area formation group, LAFCO, out of the Santa Clara County, will be publishing a preliminary or public report at the end of November that'll outline options that we'll be bringing to you to discuss. With that said, that's the conclusion of my update for you this month. Other than to introduce to you our new administrative assistant who will be helping to coordinate coordinate logistics and really a lot of what happens with the commission, and that's Whitney Zeller over on your left. Say hi, Whitney.
Hi, Whitney.
Welcome.
That concludes my report for the evening.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll try to be quick. I was gone most of September, so good to be back. I did attend the mayor's meeting last night. There's a lot of things going on. Yeah, with Bike Ped, they recently had a meeting to review the Carmen Avenue Bridge. There's a couple of options that they're going to move forward with. Their Bike Fest was very well attended. They were very happy with both families and individuals. And of course, they were delighted that Ragnarok Trail has been approved unanimously. Fine Arts has a young artist contest through November. There's one age group of 6 through 10-year-olds and another one for 10 to 14-year-olds, and the subject is what makes me smile.
Oh.
They've got 2 walls have been identified for murals for art in unexpected places. They are also looking at what kind of artwork they could put on swag for the city. So that would be Cupertino centric, I guess. The Library Commission presented a lot of details from Santa Clara County Library, as well as the Friends of the Library and the Foundation of the Library, as they generally do. Teen Commission talked about Cupertino. Planning talked about farmers market at the Oaks, where the Oaks management has been leasing some of their parking to a car dealership, and that has encroached on the farmers market area. So the farmers market area moved over to the Mary side a little more, which was causing some overflow parking issues on Mary. So, and it sounds like it's very unclear whether a use permit was required or not for leasing out this area. So they're working on a compromise, it sounds like. Yeah, Housing Commission, they're looking at the short-term rental regulations and especially on accessory dwelling units. One of the issues is that those units will not be allowed for short-term rentals. So an ADU, I guess, would not be appropriate.
Sorry, can you reiterate that?
So an accessory dwelling unit. So
Yeah, the ones that just got legalized, right, for the
yes,
state?
yeah.
Okay.
So that they're trying to encourage more of those.
Yeah.
Those would not be approved for short-term rentals like an Airbnb, fewer than 30 days. So what you really want is those available for real housing and not taking those units away from
Potential
hotels,
people. Okay, got it.
right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I had to think about that too.
Yeah,
Does that make
that
sense?
makes
I mean,
sense.
I
Yeah,
think
that
a lot
makes
of people
sense.
are
I
building
just
them
wasn't
thinking,
aware.
oh, I can rent it out for Airbnb. Well, that's not what this is for. It's really intended to try to stimulate more housing and those little things. Let's see. Public safety is looking at limiting tobacco products near schools. I guess there's some coyote issues which are ongoing.
Is there a specific school that's more impacted than another?
Not that they mentioned.
Okay.
Sustainability, they had a speaker event looking at zero waste lifestyle, just trying to, even more than recycling, just reducing our waste, because recycling is not as effective as we once believed it was. And so we still need to do it, but really the key is to reduce our waste. Yeah, so that was it. And I've been out at the Jollyman Dog Park twice with my dog. It seems to be going very well. I think the neighbors are delighted. It is really a local place. There are a few people coming in that aren't just walking in, and so that's where, I think we still need to look at how we distribute this around the city. So, because traffic. You don't want people driving to these places. You want them to be able to walk and use their neighborhood parks to do that. That's all.
Great, I think I've already reported about the Cupertino event, and I got some requests also to come to the Jollyman Park with my doggy, so I am going to show up soon. A lot of residents, after those meetings and stuff, my friends and other people, they said, okay, I know that you have a dog, why don't you come by? So I'm going to join you soon there with other residents too. It's enjoyable. Thank you. I don't have anything else to report.
Excellent. With that, we're going to go ahead and close the meeting at 10:02.